So I've been doing these daily videos now for over 6 months, and I've got some bad news. I've been looking at the numbers. I've been looking at, how growth has or hasn't been happening. I've been looking at the ad revenue numbers, been looking at the viewership numbers, been looking at all kinds of things. And the bad news is that a whole lot of people will quit something after 6 months of doing it if it doesn't explode. Right? That's the bad news. I'm not quitting this. I'm going to keep doing this daily. You know, how many albums have you bought from a musician who spent only 6 months playing the instrument or performing? How many times have you heard of some famous person, some celebrity, some actor who's only acted for 6 months or been on stages for 6 months? How often have you read a book from someone who's only ever tried writing for 6 months of their life? Yet how often do people have experiments where they'll try something, they'll put their foot in the water, they'll dip their toe in the water, and they'll try game development for 6 months. And if after half the year it's not explosive, then they quit, and they're done. And I can tell you how often, because I know, unfortunately, I've met lots of folks. My Gam Keto handle on Twitter, for a number of years, for many years, maybe actually for 6 or 7 years, it was the @HobbyGameDev handle on Twitter. And it reached a lot of hobbyist game developers. And one of the problems that I ran into was that I could amass quite a following of people who were building games as a hobby. But so many of those followers are no longer making games. So many of those people who were doing it as a hobby dipped their toes in the water for 6 months as an experiment and said, well, I guess the numbers don't justify this anymore, so I'm giving up on it. It's not how anything great ever gets done. That's not how anybody's skill ever gets tested. That's not how anything ever reaches a bigger crowd. This thing I'm doing professionally where I run a game development club, right? I've been running game development clubs since 2004. This is my third club. I've devoted like 8 or 9 years, with a couple years in between, spaced, starting and running similar organizations. That's what's got me to the point that now my club is reaching people around the world, people participating, building games together. Finished like over 40 games in the past 2 years, right? But that wasn't my first 6 months dabbling in doing this. That wasn't my first 6 months trying to even, for that matter, run this current club. The first 6 months, I'll tell you, it was a pretty small fragment of my business. Most of my work was still privately training people one-on-one. I still do a little bit of that, but now most of my business is running the club and able to focus my attention on growing and expanding that in its reach and how many people's lives it can change. But it didn't happen in the first 6 months. And it's upsetting. If I sound a little upset, it's because I'm upset. How often people only give themselves half a year to get it right. And one of the reasons why this problem happens, now not always, but one of the reasons why is because they're not going about it in a sort of sustainable approach. They're not being serious about figuring out a way to make it work for more than 6 months. You know, I mean, if these daily videos had, heck, I don't know, all kinds of animation, all kinds of high production values, if these daily videos, if we went on the scene to different locations, if I had scripts I was working on, if I brought in actors, right, if we put on a whole performance for you, then I couldn't do these things daily. Part of why I'm doing them as 3, 5, 7, 10-minute discussions is because I can fit this in daily alongside all my other work and professional obligations and personal life and just other things I gotta do, right? That's why I have no concerns about my ability to sustain doing this daily. And the same thing when I see people who've gone into game development, dipped their toes in the water, tried it for 6 months, and then flamed out and quit. It was because they're going about it unsustainably. It's because they thought that the only way to make games was to quit a day job and burn their savings while they built games, as if that's how anybody built their ramp and got themselves into building bigger games that reach more people. Almost everybody who does it sustainably is finding some other thing that they're doing and doing. It's the same thing. I love this point from when Jared Hutley was a speaker for us for, I guess it would have been GameDev Biz last year, one of our online conferences. He made the comparisons, right, to indie musicians and indie game developers, and about how many indie musicians understand the hustle so much better than game developers do because they're out there touring, they're out there putting on shows, they're out there playing at pubs and bars and wherever else they can get stage time. And most of them are keeping day jobs while they do it. Most of them are keeping other work, other sources of income, not expecting for a long time for doing what they want to do creatively, the way they want to do it, to necessarily lead to being their main thing. And that even if it doesn't, then they didn't feel like they failed because they didn't go well, they didn't like count on that. They didn't force themselves to pivot into what the market requires them to be in order to sustain themselves doing that, which might be playing covers they don't want to play. It might be doing birthday parties they don't feel like doing. Whatever it is, they figure, well, may as well make their energy and money pay off more efficiently in some other field while they do their music their way and keep pushing that out there until they figure out a way to make that work. And if it does, awesome. And if it doesn't, again, wasn't time lost, wasn't time poorly spent. It was doing it. That is, for many people, what indie music is about. And for a lot of people, indie game development is about doing their games their way that they believe in, rather than pivoting to what the market will do. It'll sustain them, rather than basically becoming a servant to the customer. They build what they want to build. And if you can find a sustainable way to do that in a way that's not just a 6-month window, but allows it to coexist alongside your work, your school, for raising a family, if you're doing that, whatever it is you're up to, and that's obviously the kind of approach we're taking Gamketo Club, because clearly I'm a believer in this approach, it's sustainable, so that it's not a 6-month window. We've had members in this club now for over 2 years, consistently involved week after week, month after month, year after year on practicing making games. Not like when people kind of like, crash for a weekend, put their life on hold for a jam. There's pros and cons to that stuff. I know it brings a lot of people into it. I think it maybe glorifies crunch culture a little bit. I think it builds some bad habits for people. I think it, I don't seem to be like I'm trashing on jams, but I guess I am. It's not sustainable, right? It glorifies the idea that game development is only something for people who are young enough or in a situation in life that they can put their entire life on hold and all their obligations for 48-hour time spans. And I don't buy that. I don't think that's the way it ought to be. I don't think it's the way it's got to be. That's why I've gone about making sure there's another better way to do it. But anyway, thought for the day is it's probably going to take more than 6 months to succeed at something, right? Plan on it taking longer than 6 months. Put the time in. Keep doing it. Don't give up on yourself. Don't give yourself some sort of excuse, some sort of arbitrary time excuse of, well, it's been 3 months without this paying off. May as well stop. Are you doing it the way you want to do it? Are you doing it the way you believe in? Are you doing it the way you can keep doing it? Then that's all you need. That's it. That's it for the day. Thanks always for tuning in. I'll have another video for you tomorrow.